Okay, and right, here we are, and I am joined by five fantastic panelists for our roundtable, talking all about cloud migrations. So first of all, thank you everybody for joining us. I'm going to start by asking you to just go around, introduce yourselves. So who are you? Where are you from? And then just give us a bit of a feel for what your experiences and expertise is around migrations. So I'm going to go first to Jonty, please.
Thanks, Phil. My name is Jonty Bale. I'm a principal architect at Cinch Cars. Cinch is a sort of consumer retail platform. We try and make it as easy as possible and take the faff out of buying a car. So we've been running now operationally for about 6 months. And so we've had some historical systems before that, which we migrated from. But we're a serverless first AWS organization at the moment. Personally, my history is sort of everything from SMEs to startups to central government. I've been involved in a number of large scale cloud migrations over the last few years.
Excellent, good stuff. On to you next, please, Bruce.
Hi, I'm Bruce Smith. I'm head of engineering at M Brown Group. So we're a fashion retailer. Got a number of different brands, the likes of Giacomo and Simply Be, some of our big ones. So I run around about 10 application development squads there, and we cover off essentially everything to do with the retail arm of the business. In terms of background and experience, I've been working with AWS for around about 10 years. And various migrations and establishing, I suppose, new development capabilities.
Yeah, great, good stuff. Steve, over to you, please.
Sure. So I'm Steve Cuthill, principal consultant at InfinityWorks, part of Accenture. We're a digital transformation consultancy. So we obviously partner with AWS and a number of joint clients to do things like digital transformations, which include cloud migrations. On a personal side of things, I'm based in Edinburgh, and I've been working on the mostly with the Amazon services for the last 7 or 8 years. You kind of lose track of time over a period of it. My background is mostly cloud engineering, cloud operations, and cloud architecture.
Yeah, perfect. Great. Thank you, Steve. Bruno, over to you, please.
Hi, my name is Bruno Almeida. I'm based in Finland, and I work as head of technology and architecture at Fortum, an energy company based in Europe. And we work a lot in developing solutions like in clean tech, sustainability, mobility. In parallel to that, I also work as an independent consultant, helping and advising companies in the areas of cloud, security, and data. My background, well, I'm basically been working as across different industries as a consultant or as an engineering manager and architect in cybersecurity. I have been working with AWS for the past 9 years and with Google Cloud and Azure for the past 2.5 years, all the way from helping CXOs and executives with cloud and data strategy and governance to engineering teams on building solutions. So it really varies. And when it comes to cloud migrations, I went cold turkey back in the day, done it myself without any help, all the way to now being helping companies to do that in an accelerated way. So happy to be here.
Excellent, thank you. And Andrew, over to you, please.
Hi, I'm Andrew Larson. I'm the AWS technical lead at PA Consulting and based in London. I'm also an AWS partner ambassador. And I've been working with AWS on and off now for probably a decade, and I'm the veteran of quite a few large AWS migrations from on-premise infrastructure.
Yeah, great. Okay, thank you very much for your introductions. As I'm sure everyone can tell, we have an enormous amount of expertise and experience here. Our aim with this roundtable is to help people get their heads around some of the challenges, some of the big opportunities, how to learn from the mistakes or from the things that everybody here has done well in the past to make their cloud migration journeys easier, quicker, less risky, that sort of thing. So We've obviously been chatting before about what topics we want to cover, and from my notes, we were talking around people and capability, moving into the cultural side of migrations, selling migrations back to the business, and how best to do that. There were some automation pieces that we want to cover as well. And then also the strategy, how, what's the best way to actually start and plan out your migration. So those are some of the themes that we're going to cover today. I wanted to start by asking Bruce first, and then Jonty, to give us just a few minutes on your cloud migration experiences. Bruce, over to you, please.
Thanks. So I was just going to talk about a little bit on the sort of M. Brown journey, because I think it's quite a common journey. So it started off with what I call the sort of click and swipe model. So i.e. Some developers set up an AWS account, started playing around with some of the base capabilities there, which is a place to start. Obviously has some challenges and some risks. But it did start to expose people to the concept of cloud computing. Then we really sort of picked it up, and I would say became a lot more serious about our migration. So the first stuff we did was in that sort of foundation stage. Number one was sorting out our account structure, putting in some of the right controls in place. Because obviously one of the big challenges with the developer sort of led click and swipe model is pretty laxed on controls, vulnerabilities all over the shop, if we're quite honest. So it was really restricting it down, getting the right account structure, right controls, and also building out some of the base alerting and monitoring capabilities. So things like sorting out our elk stack very, very early doors, building out some initial deployment pipelines. And then we moved into migration of some of our key apps. We picked off a couple. So one's one of our e-commerce engines, and one's quite a lovely old Oracle integration platform, which had a lot of challenges, but it was really around, for us, driving, allowing us to simplify our infrastructure hosting. So we had 4 or 5 different data centers, consolidating those down into a couple of data centers and then a cloud offering. And now we're in the sort of phase where it's more about building native. So now we've got that broader capability. We're building out services that are designed for cloud, using proper sort of service mesh capability, and then using that as part of our wider sort of transformation journey. And then I think the big part, probably alongside that, was twofold. One was building out what we call our platform engineering team. So that's our sort of dedicated AWS engineers who are building the pipeline and quite literally the platform for everyone to work from, and looking after a lot of that base tooling. And then the second part was I think educating the development community to make sure that they are building things in a sensible and secure manner that works in the cloud. But also, I think as we go through is putting the right controls in place, in that it is a different mechanism to work in, and then working with the likes of information security and change management, because we were running on a very old school governance regime. And to be honest, a lot of that still continues. So when we say, our migration sort of journey, it's a continuous journey for us. We are running a sort of a hybrid estate. We've still got quite a lot of stuff running in our own data center. And as we develop anything new, our default is cloud first. And we'll continue on that journey for the next few years, I'm sure. But that's sort of a flavour.
Excellent. Brilliant summary, and we'll come back and dig into some of those things in a bit more detail with you shortly. Jonty, over to you, please.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. Yeah, so Cinch is a kind of a relatively new consumer brand, but we've been around for a couple of years now. We had a challenge when it came to the pandemic about what do we do about selling cars to consumers. I think a lot of the industry faced that challenge as well. So we were running a relatively small platform in Azure at the moment. So running a very traditional stack around containerization, Kubernetes, various other things, and supporting that journey. And what came is we got to the point where we had a couple of engineering squads. We had a small organization running this. I should say that we're part of a very sort of a larger sort of FTSE 250 listed traditional company called BCA Marketplace, which changed name to Constellation Automotive Group now, but that's like a British car auctions, if you're familiar with them. They've been running quite a long time. So we were kind of an experiment that started internally there. And when obviously we had the challenges of the last year, a decision was made to pivot to sort of sell directly to consumer. And what that means is we had to take some very considered steps about what do we do to enable the business agility to make that happen. So our migration was around less about migrating sort of tin, more about migrating our business. So those choices were made around how do you achieve that? How do you do it fast? And we had to accept that we wouldn't have huge layers of massively strong centralized governance. We need to ensure that we could allow people just to get on with it and do the job. We're talking, going from zero to a delivered platform in 4 months or something. So we did that through, one of the key things around migration is to sort of constrain your objective and constrain what you're changing when you deliver it. So it was having very strong guardrails around our individual engineering teams and sort of the applications that were being built out into this new environment. So we were primarily around re-architecting rather than sort of lift and shift or doing anything else. But by doing that, it means that our teams were able to move in confidence using a very sort of limited set of variables that would help us achieve that outcome. It's a very different kind of game to where you're moving a whole bunch of legacy applications like Bruce was talking around. That's a different strategy you want to look at. But for us, we're our primary drivers around business agility. So we grew from sort of 2 squads. I think we're now at 14 squads or something in terms of working and building product, and that's going to go up even more this year. So it's an interesting opportunity, but it's really about how do we unlock the agility we needed to achieve those customer outcomes. And that was really primarily behind kind of our choice of technology, which is serverless for all of our new applications. And we are continuing to sort of double down and build more. There's lots of challenges, in terms of that migration. One of the things you have to think about is how do you evolve your sort of governance plans and governance footprints around what changes and what moves forwards, because it's never going to be quite what you expect it in. And you'll find out that you're always going to get the curveballs thrown. So have a sensible set of guardrails, have a plan for what you want to achieve as your kind of stage 1. And then where you go beyond that it's going to constantly change. So you just need to be flexible in terms of that nature. And that's sort of some of the lessons we've learned, really.
Yeah, great. Good stuff. Okay, I'm going to go now to either Bruno, Andrew, or Steve. Who wants to pick up the first question or a reflection on something, on any of the points that Bruce and Jonty have raised? So who wants to kick us off?
I've got a question for Bruce, if that's okay. I was just going to ask you, Bruce, is how did you decide what to migrate first? Because sometimes having a good proof of concept is very important.
So it was pretty difficult, actually, because we sort of weighing up two dimensions. So one is you want to get something up into the cloud relatively quickly so you can start to use it to gain support in the wider business. And then the second side is getting something that's actually going to add some value back in. So we picked Hybris, which is part of our e-commerce engine, on 2 fronts. One was it was struggling on its existing infrastructure, so we would have had to have done some investment around that infrastructure anyway. And then the second part is as a product, we knew that it would run in AWS, so hence we were pretty confident we could do it in a reasonable timeline, of which it was I think 3 or 4 months it took us to stand up and get up and running.
Yeah, so I think it is always an interesting compromise. You don't want to try something that's too easy for your first migration.
Exactly.
But you do want to build that business confidence and show that it's working. So it sounds like you were facing those common challenges.
Agreed. Yeah, and I think the big part for us was it was almost demonstrating what we wanted to prove. So we knew that the product would work in cloud, but it was demonstrating that us as an organization could deploy it, and we could deploy it through a structured sort of deployment pipeline in an automated manner. That was the other big.
Cool. Steve, I think you were the first out of you and Bruno to put your hand up, so I'm going to come to you next. Where do you want to take this next?
Yeah, Bruno, there was Bruce. Sorry, there was definitely a kind of very common thread when you went through the governance side of it and kind of defining the account structure, the segregation model, etc. I've seen this happen from the smallest kind of startups all the way to large kind of corporate banks that they want to go into the cloud. They get an account set up for them. Developers are literate, and then before you know it, you have a functional application. Then you have a functional service. Then you need to start worrying about actually how are we going to scale this model from this one little application, this one little account, to moving our entire or the majority of our kind of data center into the cloud. So that's one of the kind of the key themes that keeps on coming up with kind of engagement after engagement is this particular problem that people don't put that initial investment in the planning on how they're actually going to scale their AWS environment until they're already there. And then they have to start making kind of backout changes and rejigging things on the fly. When if they just did that little bit extra up front, they would have probably saved themselves a little bit of a headache further down the line. So it's really, really common.
Good stuff. And Bruno, to your point, you were bring up.
I think I have a nice segue from that, which both Bruce and Jonty talked about, the governance, and that's. I think it's something that a lot of organizations don't realize when they are starting the cloud. It all, of course, depends on your starting point and if you have people that know about cloud helping you or not. But they realize, when you are having a lot of stuff on premise, they start using cloud and they try to apply the same things that they have been doing so far in the cloud. And it doesn't work that way because actually, what got you here will not get you there. Literally, the same governance things will not apply there because there are a lot of different nuances that are important to consider. One is that you are empowering the teams to have more control by then relinquish some of the control. So the whole governance aspect needs to be taught very differently. And it does help. It doesn't mean that you need to put in the trash bin your kind of your governance methods, but you will need to reform them quite a lot. And that's something that people don't understand. Yes, you still need to do like incident management in the cloud. Of course you do. You still need to do cost management in the cloud. Yes, you do. You still need operations in the cloud. Yes, you do. Actually, quite a lot. But the thing is that those things will be differently. And one of the things that I'm not actually quite sure if with Bruce, I didn't understand that part. That were you trying to do it by yourself without cloud experience, or you had some people or company guiding you, because it makes a huge difference. One is that all of these pitfalls that someone will tell you early on, like, hey, be aware of this, you need to set up this, otherwise that will happen, and that makes a really big difference.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. Go on, Bruce.
And I was going to say, we worked with a partner, and it did make a massive difference. So I think that first phase was led in internally, and it was best efforts and some really good thought process, but people didn't have the battle scars. And then we worked with a partner, and we've actually changed across a couple of partners now as we've gone through that maturity curve, because the needs and demands on day one are very different to where they are now, and there's a real we still struggle a little bit with the governance side, in that we've still got some applications running on quite a traditional governance model, and it just doesn't work in the same way as you said, Bruno. And the big debate I always have with people is more, look, we bake the governance into our deployment pipelines. There's more control, there's more governance in what we're doing today than in some of the traditional ways of working, but it's just different.
Yeah, I think that's what I was going to say. Is in terms, it's really interesting in terms of when you look at one of the biggest things I found that historically doing some migrations in central government is you have to get all your different governance stakeholders aligned with what you're trying to achieve, and there has to be like a deep understanding that you're moving from like a preventative governance model where you kind of approve stuff to almost like a sort of, it's an auditing governance model where you can see exactly everything that's going on, so you know what's happening, you know what's being done, but you don't necessarily get the ability to stand in the middle and go, no, you can't go any further. It's about that kind of control and response and responsive nature of things rather than kind of a checkbox exercise. And that's one of the biggest challenges I've found in other orgs, is that can be very painful if you get it wrong.
Bruno.
Yeah, I think that is exactly that. What people don't realize is twofold, that before maybe your governance was very centered of having the guidelines written and hoping for the best that someone will follow them. While in the cloud, it's very easy actually to make that happen. I mean, it's the same of saying, if I have a guideline that says like, well, you need to use encryption at rest. Well, in the cloud, I can actually see if that's happening or not, right? And some things are a lot easier, some things are a lot harder. That's also like important to understand. But one of the overlooked aspects is the people. People assume cloud is just a technical thing. It's not about the technical thing. Well, sorry, there is a lot of technical thing, but the cultural aspect is super important because, and with the help of partners, there's also like one potential problem. And I think a lot of organizations need to understand that, you know, if you don't have experience with cloud, you hire a partner, and you might have the risk of, you know, partner moves things from A to B, and things get natively used in cloud, and that's perfect. You did it. The question is, are you now independent enough to run it by yourself without a partner or not? So, cloud needs to be also transformation to your company. It needs to be making sure that you can also change your culture, mindset, your processes to adapt to that. And a lot of partners sometimes don't do that. Sometimes it's just about moving A to B without involving you in the moving process.
Yeah, Andrew, I saw your hand pop up just before.
No, I was just going to say, I think one of the things around governance that I found is this whole bringing people with you. So, and in a lot of organizations, I've seen sort of the people around information assurance. They're one of the first teams I would always speak to and try and get them on board, because the controls they're used to are completely different. So, I mean, one example I've seen in the past where IA teams, they wanted to know exact things about makes and models of firewalls and that sort of thing. And they just aren't going to have that information in the cloud. But what they are going to have is a lot more of an audit trail. They can have far more granular controls. And it's really a case of, I think, bringing them on the journey with them and actually telling them that they're getting much better controls and much more comprehensive controls, but it is very, very different. And it takes time to sort of build those relationships and really bring them on the journey with you. So the earlier you start anything like that, I think the more successful it normally is.
Cool. Now, Steve, I'm going to come to you in a second.
Sure.
We move on from, I know we're covering lots of things, but there's been a fair amount of talk of governance. I think we can branch now to either, let's talk about people and skills, I think. But then there is also, we've just been talking about the, I've lost my train of thought. But Steve, where do you want to take things next?
So what I was kind of going to say was about kind of having a partner and selecting the right partner that fits your business objectives and your kind of business's culture as well. And I think initially, if you're new to the cloud, they will need to do a lot of heavy lifting for you and help you take you on that journey. And if you've got the right kind of partner as well, part of their responsibility is to start to train and build the capabilities within your business. A decent partner does not want to have you kind of anchored to them for forever. That's my view. A bad business model. So it's about kind of building building that capability within your team, taking as much experience and advice and guidance from your chosen partner, so you can become more self-sufficient over the period of time. Depending, sometimes that journey can be relatively short, sometimes that can be relatively long, but the end goal really is to build the in-house skills, so you are self-sufficient. You know what you need to do to maintain what you've got and to kind of build forward as well. So a good partner will not just deliver a solid technical solution, but will build your business up to support the cloud and the people to use that particular platform.
Yeah. So yeah, people and skills then, Jonty, how do you feel, is that an easy thing to nail within Cinch? You say
no, it's not. It's easy. It's not easy. Nothing's easy these days. Anyone that says so is lying. But what I will say is it's I think it's bang on, really. One of the challenges we've had a lot of people, we've moved technology stacks as well as moving cloud providers and various other things, but we've kind of made those conscious decisions. We were using a mix of .NET Core and various other stuff. We're now 100% TypeScript, because that was made, just limit the options so people know what they're doing. But yeah, it's a constant challenge in terms of learning. The gamut of technology that's used in public cloud nowadays is so broad that you get to a situation when people don't know what they're missing. So that's a real risk and a danger. So I think it's completely valuable to have a partner involved. But I think the bit we need to think about it's about education of people who are not just involved in the migration. So we talked about the other food groups and all the other people. It's not just I need to migrate this workload. It's actually, you need to transform your organization to actually understand these ways of working, which is, that's a more challenging ask, I think. And it's something we've not quite got to the bottom of. How does that look like? And what do we need to do that?
Bruno, go for it. Who's got the answer?
9 years ago, I was in the other side of the people, of the others that needed to be transformed. And I was very against cloud. This is a confession, okay? I'm going to say a confession. I was very against cloud 9 years ago. But you need to understand my point of view. And I will share my point of view because I'm pretty sure a lot of people fall into that. One is that I was working in the cybersecurity industry. We were doing hypervised-based behavioral analysis, meaning that we were taking files and URLs and using basically executing those and extracting what was happening from the hypervisor perspective. We were making protection capabilities to customers. Now run that on the cloud. First, security implications. What if something goes bad and you start actually running a botnet all of a sudden? Or also, we needed hardware for a lot of the things, actually hardware. And I had interesting discussions with AWS because they said, you don't need hardware. And I said, yes, I do. And I proved them wrong that, yes, I needed hardware. And all of a sudden, you have AWS bare metal servers. Think about that now. So there are things that, there are some limitations to cloud, yes. But those are limitations also tend to be lifted. And I think that's also something that I learned along the way, is that some things that, and some, before we start actually the recording, someone was mentioning about, non-Intel type of hardware. Yes, I mean, for sure, there are limitations. There's also hybrid architectures that serve for that specific purpose. So my point is that sometimes it takes time. Each person has its own rhythm to understand that the things, and sometimes it takes different ways to have that message, shared for the other people to understand. Definitely, you need to have one maybe group in the company that spearhead, that understands, is in the same wavelength, but you also need to kind of cater the message and transform the message so that it doesn't sound condescending, because there are valid reasons from the other side sometimes, and sometimes we don't really understand that first.
Yeah, go for it, Bruce.
I was just going to pick on a point there around taking time. So I think when we started our sort of transformation journey, we spent a lot of time talking to people about the benefits and the whys, and then in the middle, because we were manically busy, transforming things, moving things, and all of the challenges that brings, we let some of that engagement and communication slip. And therefore, I think one of the lessons is making sure you carve out the time A, for some of the people doing the migration to have those discussions, but B, for some of the other side, the doubters, the people who are going to challenge, to actually have the challenge and have the debate and work through it. Because actually, some of our biggest wins were the doubters on day one. Because if you can convert a couple of those, then they become part of that sort of that chorus and that group. So I think that's one side, and then the other side is probably more from a business perspective, articulating back certainly into our exec about some of the value of cloud and the flexibility it brings. So to bring a sort of a real life example, we have a load of our legacy estate running on physical kit. Well, at the beginning of COVID, when everyone got sent home in a 24-hour period, people were massively struggling to access that kit. Anything on cloud, everyone just took their laptop home, opened it up at home, and continued working. And it's some of that type of experience and that type of flexibility that you can't have the foresight to see in advance, but it articulates the value of the wider transformation.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, Andrew. Yeah.
So I was just going to say, I think one of the things that separates some of the most successful cloud migrations that I've seen from some of the less successful ones is this understanding that it isn't just a cost-saving exercise. Some people go into a cloud migration just saying, we need to get out of this physical data center. We've been told that the cloud's cheaper. And that sort of is their driving force. And sometimes the cloud actually isn't cheaper, because once it opens up all those possibilities, it means you can actually, make choices, and you can try new lines of business, and you can experiment, and you can also sort of take the shackles off a lot of your developers. Normally, in a lot of organizations, developers are very, very constrained by the physical hardware they can access. So testing and that sort of thing is very slow. And you can do that much quicker in the cloud, but you have to make those conscious decisions to, how much you want to spend on it. But I think the whole thing about you do really need to sort of really educate people on the possibilities. And that's one of the things that I think really makes it more successful.
Yeah, Jonty.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. Something that's kind of quite interesting on that is don't dismiss the cost benefits outright. So one of the things I've found, especially working in central government, is that when you talk about procurement strategies, one of the things that's very advantageous if you are going to look to digitally transform your business over a 3 or 4 year window, if you have to sign up for a 10-year contract for hosting something on-prem, and you can just lift and shift it into cloud for 2 years and then transform it, that's a really powerful thing as well when it comes to senior management. So that it's the cloud is just sort of the just move it because it will save us money. It might not save you money in the kind of the near term, but it actually helps you move away from that kind of long CapEx cycle into more of a kind of an OpEx view. And that really helps in terms of trying to unlock some other stuff. So it's just an interesting thought.
Oh, it's kind of like it's the journey is the key rather than the destination, because that's a spot on point. If you need to move it out there for various financial reasons, let's do that, and then we'll spend the time to reinvest and re-engineer to take advantage of cloud native.
There's been a very big, long, on-running program recently in the British government about moving off mainframes, and those dev environments have been in AWS for many years, and then they finally moved the production systems over in the last few months, or some of them, and that's a massive win based on stuff you have to pay the company to support you because you're the only customer for 40 years plus. Those kind of scenarios, you definitely want to do what you can.
Yeah, definitely. Bruno, did you have your hand up there? Or
Yeah, but I think actually Jonty, beat me to the punch with the same thing, which it's this kind of from a CTO, CIO aspect. Usually, the cost tends to be the main driver for the cloud migration, and it's usually a pitfall because it might not save you money in the beginning. It might actually cost you more because you have a learning at least curve and investment. I think other part that is kind of at least based on discussions that I had across different industries, is that people still see cloud as this is a stuff for tech companies. And they don't realize, like across all industries, from manufacturing to media to energy to you name it, they all need cloud. Every company is a technology company. That's usually the saying, how it goes, right? And that's something that people don't realize, that yes, they need to be investing into cloud. Now, one kind of, there's essentially, migrating to cloud or migrating an application to cloud boils down to three main strategies. The lift and shift that we have been talking about, you take it as it is, you run it on virtual or hardware servers there, you have exactly the same outcome, but it's running on the cloud. You cloudified it, you're thinking, right? The other is, of course, that you do a re-platform, right? That you take it, but maybe some of the things you are now leveraging some managed service, let's say a managed database or, centralized logging, and you kind of, you are kind of transitioning to cloud in a bit of a smarter way there. There's a bigger learning curve. And of course, the other one is that you re-architect the whole thing to be cloud native, to be event-driven, to be serverless, as an example. And that's kind of a completely ball game. It takes usually more time for the development team to get there, because the learning curve is much greater. So a very common is to lift and shift or re-platform and then that. So, over time, it will save you money, because the learning grows, because you start also to think differently about it. But this is something that immediately some companies, don't realize, some different levels of the organization. And
yeah. Steve, actually, have you got thoughts on how you would guide customers around that strategy? How do you get started, and how do you plan out a migration?
So it depends on what is their end game for that. If the end game is, for them, is kind of short term, that they have a data center, they have hardware that is end of life. They've got 12 months before they need to vacate that data center. So the objective would be that we have to kind of help them move, probably lift and shift that piece of equipment, get the data and the apps off of that, and move that into the cloud. And if that is what they want, and that is the end game for them, that is a perfectly valid kind of cloud migration for them. But if they have kind of wider and bigger objectives with that, and bigger ideas that they want to maybe reinvest or redevelop their application or service they're offering, then that is when kind of you start thinking about, well, do we re-architect this existing platform? Will that give them kind of benefit? What will be the length of time that would take to deliver that particular change? Or do we simply draw a line under the sand and just say, okay, this is what you've currently got, but using again, serverless is a great example of this kind of this approach. Using kind of cloud native technologies, we can give you infinite scale virtually infinite scale for your services. The costing is kind of all kind of pay as you use for that one. So there's zero upfront costs for these particular services, and the kind of not to underestimate the agility of developing on particular service platforms in the cloud. So it'd be try to understand really what is their end game. Are they happy with keeping it just kind of onto the cloud and letting it live there until it's no longer required, or do they want to do something kind of more with that one? So it's really just understanding kind of the requirements.
Yeah. Andrew, you were first with your hand, I think, and then we'll come to you.
I was just going to say I completely agree with Steve, and knowing the objectives, so often there is a hard deadline and that sort of thing does drive a migration. But I was going to say the other thing is you can have a hybrid of approaches. Quite often you will have teams that are at different levels of maturity within a larger business. So there will be some applications you may redevelop. There might be a couple of applications you've got that are using legacy technology where you're incurring ridiculous license costs. So it makes sense to transform those first. So most of the cloud migrations that I've been involved with have included elements of cloud. Some bits will be rebuilt cloud native, some bits will be a bit of a replatform, and you end up with sort of a hybrid approach for different components. And you can blend those approaches together very successfully with different teams.
Great. Yeah. And Bruce?
And I think just building on that, I think what we've found is it drives a lot of that almost application lifecycle management and view around what's going to happen with the application. So you go back to looking at is it appropriate to migrate into the cloud? Because some tech isn't, or it has a very short lifespan. So why do it? And then looking and saying, actually, how can you for any of you are going to migrate, how can you transform it once it's there? So quite a few of ours we've migrated, I'd say a light re-engineering approach to get it there and automate deployment. And then we find over the next 6 months, we're doing a lot of work to fully automate the deployment pipeline and right size the sort of infrastructure and AWS state around it, in that we tend to go heavy on day one, because it's difficult to understand all of the infrastructure and performance characteristics, and then scale back and optimize costs and restrict down over the next sort of 3 to 6 months.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, good. Okay, right. We have just a couple of minutes left of this session, so I wanted to see who had some final thoughts or tips or words of advice. Jonty, thank you. Hand straight up. Good.
It's just a quick one on talking about people we forget to talk to when we do cloud migrations. I think we've talked a few things around finance. Finance is really important. You talk to upfront, because it's usually a radically different procurement model we've kind of highlighted on. And also one of the things you actually really need to pay attention on is cost management, and have something in place. Depending on the scale of your migration and what you're moving, it can be incredibly painful and quite embarrassing if someone turns around and you get a couple of £100,000 extra bill or $1,000 on your bill because someone just happened to click the wrong button. I've been there, not done it personally, but been exposed to that kind of the wash up of that kind of event.
Should not experience that. No, it's just common across, isn't it? So yeah. Sorry to interrupt. Carry on.
No, that was it really. It was just saying, don't forget to talk to your finance team, because A, it will change your budgeting and forecasting, and that can be really painful from an organizational aspect, and B, be on top of cost management from the get-go.
Super. Steve?
Yeah, my kind of advice would be find that right partner for you that matches your needs and culture. If you need one, bring not just your tech teams, but bring your entire business on board this project and go there as one unit, because the journey is far more important than the destination, and bringing everyone along with it.
Brilliant. Yeah. Who's next? Andrew?
I would also say with that one of the things is there is no substitute for experience. So they're finding someone who has done it before and who can help with a lot of those things really can make the difference. And the other thing that is very worth doing as well is very early on in the process, if you're looking for a large amount of infrastructure on AWS, is actually talking to AWS. Quite often there are programs that they can help, which will help with some of the migration cost, and partners will be able to advise with that also. But I think a lot of people forget AWS started off as being this sort of self-service website where you go and buy compute. And there are actually, especially for the more enterprise things, there are actually account managers there which will be able to give you help and support, and there's different service levels, and there is actually a whole company full of solution architects and cloud economists that will really help you with this stuff. And it seems like a very obvious thing, but I think building those relationships with AWS for your business can really make a difference.
That's a good point. Yeah, and then either Bruce or Bruno, you've got final thoughts for us?
All right. I think that having that partner that can help you, that person that can help you, helps a lot. It makes a whole difference. I think it's also about not just regardless of where you are in the organization, it can be a lot easier than you think. Like, it's not rocket science. A lot of companies have been through this. That's also what you need to understand. You are not the only one. So yes, regardless if you are like a software engineer, it's important to find engagement from management level. If you are from the management level, you need to engage the engineers, trying to, you need to have a combined approach. And if you don't know how to engage different groups in the organization, or even AWS, that's also like what the partner, having a correct group of people that can help you does. So like you don't need to do it alone. And yes, it's not rocket science. And that was my thoughts.
Great. Bruce, do you have anything else to add? Or I feel I'm asking you again to give your final thoughts, am I?
To be fair, I think I'd probably second Andrew's final thoughts on, spend some time engaging with AWS and building those relationships with Amazon. They can not only help you directly, but they can also, they've got a massive partner network, and they can help you find the right partner. So I think that's really important.
Yeah, fantastic. Right, we are at time. Really interesting. That time has flown, I have to say. So thank you all again very much for sharing all of your thoughts. And we'll hopefully have you back again doing something similar in the future. Thanks,
pleasure.
Thanks.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.